Maybe you all watch that TV reality show. Who do you think you are? Anybody see that show? Yeah, a few of you have. They bring in celebrities for ancestry research. The results are sometimes really moving and other times extremely astonishing. But I kind of have to ask, do you really want to know? When you do an ancestry research, who knows what you might find. But with the new DNA search stuff, it's all the rage. My mom once told me that in our family line, there's one side that just kind of abruptly ends. There's one branch we can't quite trace any further back. She says that may be a blessing. She says, who knows what we might find if we were to dig deeper? She suspects he was a horse thief. Who knows? But guests on this show, who do you think you are, not only go searching for their own forebears boldly, but they do it while other people watch. One guest was Sir Matthew Pinsent. If you follow Olympic rowing, you may already know that he won 10 World Championship gold medals and 4 consecutive Olympic gold medals in rowing. Just rowing. These days, he's a commentator for the sport with the BBC. Well, at least that's who he thought he was until he appeared on Who Do You Think You Are? The research into his family tree, like most family trees, was a mix. Some people were bad guys. One guy was imprisoned and was in a very public way. And other folks were really good folks. And in his case, some of his people were even royalty. But it never occurred to him when he went into this process that they would be able to link his lineage directly back to God. You see, his line went back to Catherine Howard. Most of you know that's the 5th wife of Henry VIII, right? From there, they traced him back to Edward I, which some of you probably actually do know meant he was kin to William the Conqueror, William the Great. There's another name for William who was born out of wedlock, but we don't need to use that one this morning. Well, among King William's papers is an ancient scroll that claims he descended from Adam and Eve. Thus, promoters of the programs asserted Sir Matthew Pinsent was descended from God. Who do you think you are indeed? Please pray with me. May the words of my mouth and the meditations of all of our hearts be acceptable to you, O God, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. This morning's text offers an interesting juxtaposition. First is the 2 Samuel text. It is a text where David is the kinsman of the Israelites, and they invite him to become their king. Besides being a proven warrior, he is the same bone and flesh, as the text puts it, as the Israelites. While David has been away a while, and there were those attempts by the former king of Israel, Saul, to kill David, these folks now, these elders now say, let's put that behind us. You be our king. You're one of us. It just makes sense. Well, meanwhile, in the other text this morning is in Mark, Jesus heads back to Nazareth, his hometown, and there's not exactly what one would call a ticker tape parade for him. Mark's version is not as bad as the way Luke tells it, where they almost throw him off a cliff. But Mark's account still tells the story of rejection. Jesus grew up in Nazareth, but he's been away a while. Word has reached home about his ministry. You can imagine the conversation in the local brew pub. You know, they're saying he made a paralyzed man walk. Well, I heard he healed a leper. Someone said he calmed a storm. Well, did you hear he drove out a demon that had possessed a man? I heard he supposedly brought a dead child back to life. You know, they say his teaching pierces the heart and penetrates the soul. When Jesus shows up on the Sabbath as the guest speaker, you can bet the pews are full. He reads from the scroll. He speaks with such authority that they're all amazed. Amazed. That seems like a good thing, right? When you're amazed, don't you want to know more? Aren't you curious? Don't you stop for kind of a second glance? Wow. But the Nazarenes immediately play the tape in their heads of who this guy used to be. This is the carpenter's son. This is the kid we watched babysit his younger siblings. The kid who was obviously never going to make much of a carpenter. They're amazed that he appears to think too highly of himself. Hey, Jesus, who do you think you are? Then it's Jesus' turn to be amazed. Amazed at their unbelief. Amazed. Jesus looks at these people the way he looks at everyone, with the eyes of unconditional love. He sees to their core. He can see their potential, the potential God put there. But they refused to live into it. Wow. Really? Well, okay then. And like everything else in Mark, the scene moves on. Jesus doesn't dwell on the experience. He just notices it with amazement. Then he tells his disciples, guys, familiarity breeds contempt sometimes. We can't let this slow us down. In fact, we're about to ramp it up a lot. Rather than travel together as a large group, I'm going to send you out in twos. I want you to travel light. I want you to stay where they welcome you. Oh, and if you run into folks like the ones we ran into in Nazareth, don't even carry the dust of that place on your shoes. That's not your burden. If anyone else asks you as disciples, who do you think you are? Well, then you can tell them, we're the demon-conquering ambassadors of Jesus. Thank you very much. We might ask ourselves the same question. Who do we think we are? It's not a bad question to ask. And there are some times in our lives when it's even more important that we ask it, particularly in times of transition. Like the summer after that last year of high school, who do we think we are? It's a good question as we experience the new normal after the loss of a loved one. Who do we think we are? It's a good question as we become parents or grandparents for the first time or the 10th time. Who do we think we are? It's also a really good question to ask yourselves as you face the next chapter in the story of Central Christian Church, Lebanon. Who do you think you are? It wasn't the worst question for Jesus' hometown neighbors to ask Jesus, who do you think you are? Jesus himself seems interested in the question of identity. In another place in the text, he says, "Who do people say that I am? Who do the crowds say that I am? Who do you say that I am?" How we answer that question shapes our understanding of Jesus, of course. And by extension, our self-understanding, our understanding of our neighbor, our understanding of the wider world. It makes a difference. For example, if we think Jesus is a warrior or a prophet or a suffering servant. It makes a difference if we think Jesus is our personal attendant or the healer of a broken world. It makes a difference what we think. It makes a difference that we think. Not thinking, bad thinking by Christians has produced some of the world's greatest horrors. Who do we think we are? Who do we think Jesus is? But perhaps even more important than what the disciples think about Jesus, what they think, is what they do. Jesus didn't ask for admirers. As Soren Kierkegaard, one of the theologians of the middle century, and others have pointed out, he didn't seek worshipers. He didn't look for adherents. He consistently spoke of followers and disciples. Jesus talked about followers. He had some ideas for his followers, his disciples, about what they were to do. Looking at this text this morning, it's pretty clear what to do as a follower of Jesus. You go out. Take very little with you. No food, no suitcase, no money, no weapons, no extra clothes. You go out. You stay in people's homes. You eat their food. It may sound a little foreign to us today to go in this way to places that are strange to us, to know where to stay only because you're to stay with the people who will take you in, to go without all the provisions you need to survive on your own. Now, can you imagine a Nelson camping trip that was planned in that way? You wouldn't dream of going out that way, would you? No, you've been out where you forgot something important, maybe even the matches. You know, you have a checklist of the essentials that cover every possible scenario. Your first aid kit, you have it all. When you go camping, you take everything you need. Am I right? Yeah, I'm right. Of course I'm right. I've been camping. I know about this. But for some folks, going like this, without everything you can imagine you might need, is a really literal practice. Folks like your new pastor, Nathan Kibler. He'll come with his spouse, Teresa, to Lebanon in a couple of months. He'll visit in your homes. He'll eat your food. He'll rely on your hospitality. And there will be many gifts he will give in return. The Kiblers are probably right now, well, maybe not right now, but this week, starting to wrap things up, pack them into boxes, figure out where they're going to be next. And they're going to bring a lot of things with them on this journey. And that's okay because they plan to be here a while. But Jesus seems to be saying in this text, don't worry about what you bring. What you need is inside you. The very most important thing Nathan and Teresa will bring you in this ministry is themselves. And let me tell you, that's the most important gift you will give them, yourselves. They will be formed by the journey they've had with Jesus, and that's what's in their core, just like it is in yours. Our journey, at its core, It's about honesty, authenticity, integrity, about knowing who we are in the face of forces that demean or dismiss or distract. And surely those times come in everyone's lives. Our journey is about a deep knowledge of who we are. So even when someone asks that question, they can have a sneer on their face and we still know the answer. Who do you think you are? I know who I am. Sue Ann Big Crow was a Lakota girl. She lived on the Pine River Reservation in South Dakota until she died tragically in a car accident at the age of 17. Her story is shared in a book by Ian Fraser called On the Res. The Lakota, remember, were Native American people who once inhabited the Black Hills region of South Dakota. They lost their land, as so many Native peoples did, when white people moved in and took it away from them. Most of the Native people who remain now live on reservations, like Sue Ann. Sue Ann Big Crow played for the Pine Ridge High School basketball team, the Lady Thorpes. They'd go out and play against the teams in the white high schools in the region. Now, in most towns they went to, there was a strong but friendly rivalry. They were good at their game and they liked the competition. But in some towns, there was a tremendous racial tension, even conflict when the Lady Thorpes came into town. And one of those towns was Lead, South Dakota. When Sue Ann was 14, she and the rest of the team arrived in Lead, dressed in their uniforms and their warm-up jerseys. They waited in the hallway, as was their custom, to go into the gym. The visiting team would go onto the court, do a couple of laps around the court, and then the home team would do the same, to the cheers of each of their respective fans. Well, as these girls stood there that day in Lead, they could hear some of the white fans of the Lead High School team chanting fake Indian chants to taunt them, to mock them. The girls at the front of the line peeked through the door. They saw some of the fans waving food stamps to make fun of them. Then someone hollered, "Where's the cheese? Where's the cheese?" The joke being that anytime Indians are standing in line, it's for government handouts, of course. The girl at the front of the line turned back to her team. "I can't handle this." So Sue Ann stepped up and said, "I'll lead us out." They gave Sue Ann the ball and she stood first in line. Then she led her team onto the court, dribbling the basketball. On the court, the noise was deafening. Sue Ann went right down the middle and then stopped when she got to center court. Her teammates were taken by surprise. They even bumped into each other, not realizing she was going to stop. The coach at the very back of the line's wondering, what in the world is going on? Sue Ann tossed the ball to her teammate, and then she jumped into the jump ball circle right in the middle of the court, and she unbuttoned that jacket. She took it off. She put it over her shoulders, and she began to dance the Lakota shawl dance. Sue Ann knew all the traditional dances. The one she chose was the young woman's dance. It's graceful, it's modest, but it's kind of showy at the same time. And then she started to sing. Sue Ann started to sing in Lakota, singing in Lakota, doing the shawl dance, using her warm-up jacket as a shawl, and the crowd went completely silent. All the jeers of the Leeds fans stopped. It was like what she did reversed the whole situation. In the sudden quiet, all they could hear was her Lakota song. Then Sue Ann dropped her jacket and took the ball back. That event transformed the team's relationship with Lead. It was as if Sue Ann in her impromptu shawl dance had made Lakota relatives of everyone present. Bone of our bone, flesh of our flesh. Over time, the girls got to know the lead players and some of their parents. They discovered, they said, that there were some really good people in lead. Who do we think we are? Let me take a stab at that. We, my friends, are sons and daughters of God, created in the image of a good and generous Creator, each with our own unique gifts and graces to share. Who are we? We are flawed and broken, and therefore the perfect choice to tend this beautiful, wounded planet and its people. Who are we? We are people of heart and soul, made for times such as these, empowered by the Spirit of God moving within us and around us and through us. Who do we think we are? We're part of the family of God, joint heirs with Jesus, as the song goes, in all that God has in mind for us to inherit. Who do we think we are indeed?